So back to the Porter stuff now. We're going to talk about definitions. He's very keen on definitions. So definitions, according to Porter, can be stipulative or reportive, right? So the stipulative one is where you decide what the word is going to mean. So you say, right, by groupoid, I shall mean an algebraic object with the following properties, right? And then you write them down. You write down the axioms for groupoids or whatever it is, and there you are. You have defined your word. So stipulative is always where you stipulate the meaning of the word, and you can do that in maths and science when you invent new concepts. Or they can be reportive. So reportive definitions are the ones you find in dictionaries. Dictionaries invent new meanings. They try to just record the meanings that words have already, right? So different definitions may also work by giving lists of necessary and sufficient conditions. So a necessary condition is obviously it's a property that a thing must have in order to be a thing of that sort. So, for example, supposing our concept is cow, right? Supposing we are earnestly, scientifically trying to define the word cow, and we decide to do it by necessary and sufficient conditions. Well, what are the necessary conditions for something to be a cow? Well, it has to be a mammal. You can't be a cow if you're not a mammal. It has to be a ruminant. Better be female, strictly speaking. Cows are female, aren't they? So those are necessary conditions for being a cow. Sufficient conditions for being a cow. Well, if you are Daisy the cow, that guarantees that you're a cow. So a sufficient condition is one where if you satisfy that condition, then you will definitely be a cow. So if you are a Holstein heifer, then you're definitely a cow, right? Because the category of Holstein heifer is included in the category of cows. So the idea with necessary and sufficient conditions is that you increase the necessary conditions and you increase the sufficient conditions until you get to the point where they match, and then you have your definition. Now, if you think that that works, well, that only works if both language is very tidy and also if the world is very tidy, right? So if you think the world neatly divides up into categories that sit inside each other, so that you can say, well, to be Daisy the cow, you have to be a Holstein heifer, and to be a Holstein heifer, you have to be a cow, and to be a cow, you have to be a ruminant, and to be a ruminant, you have to be a mammal, and to be a mammal, you have to be an animal. To be an animal, you have to be a living thing. There you are. You've reached your top category. Well, maybe the world is organised like that in some parts. But then there are things like the duck-billed platypus that seem to reach across categories. There are things that seem to break the boundaries. There are fuzzy boundaries. So there seems to be a kind of metaphysical commitment to an orderly world built into the idea of defining by necessary and sufficient conditions. So this is quite important. This is a point I want to dwell on a bit. If what you have to say about the structure of language has something to say about what you think about the structure of the world, if you think that language maps onto the world pretty closely, and if you think that language is ultimately rather tidy, in the way its concepts fit into each other, like Russian dolls, well, then that commits you to a rather tidy metaphysics. If you think that the world is a sort of surging, untidy thing with fuzzy edges and categories that flow into each other and that just won't be tidied up, then if language is too tidy, then it will be inaccurate, right? So maybe if you think the world is like that, then maybe calling for clear definitions is actually unrigorous, because you come up with an inaccurate, because excessively tidy, picture of what the world's like. So your philosophy of language quickly says something about your approach to philosophy and the world in general. Other definitions might just give synonyms. They might just give you a word that has the same meaning, but this may or may not be useful to you. Ultimately, it only takes us round in circles. Anyway, definition may not be the best way to convey or understand the meaning of a word. Examples, contrasts may help you more. Okay. Now, moving beyond Porter, I want to give you some reasons for not relying on dictionaries. First reason, there are going to be several. First reason, words depend on their context, on their contrast, and on idioms. So, for example, the word man can be contrasted with woman, boy, dog, angel, God, and so on. If someone says to you, "Be a man," they might mean, don't be a child. They might, if they haven't been paying attention to gender politics for the last 50 years, they might mean don't be behaving like a woman. You need to know, right? To know what somebody means when they say act like a man. Well, it may mean don't act like an animal, or it may mean, if somebody says you are a man, that may mean you're not a god, right? So that the meaning of that remark depends on which contrast is in play. And you won't get that from the dictionary, really. The dictionary may offer you those options. It may help a bit, but it won't tell you which one of them is in play on the occasion of use and the particular case that you're reading or hearing. Words might mean the same thing according to the dictionary, but they have, like what we said about connotation. So if somebody says, "You look a vision," that's good, right? Somebody says, "You look a sight." Well, strictly speaking, vision and sight mean the same thing, but those two sentences, I think, mean different things. So a dictionary won't tell you which contrast is in play and what the context is. You have to read the rest of the text to find out. This is a bit of humanities holism, right? I am going to bang on about humanities holism in future weeks. But the basic thought is that in the humanities and humanities disciplines, we tend to understand things by putting them in their context, by thinking about what other words, what other gestures, what other cultural goings on are packed in around the thing we're trying to understand. Whereas in the mathematicized sciences, physics, chemistry, and so on, you understand things by taking them out of their context, by stripping off all the local details. So if somebody throws a book out of a window, you want to know when it'll hit the ground. You don't think of it as a book. You think of it as a point mass. And you certainly don't think about which book, right? Whereas humanities understanding of this event, you'll want to know, well, which book and who threw it, under what circumstances. Makes all the difference if it's a religious text might mean one thing. Possibly an author might throw their own book out the window, and that would be a completely different gesture. So in the humanities, you understand things by contextualizing, whereas in the natural sciences, more often than not, you understand things by taking them out of their context, taking the details off. Second reason for not relying on dictionaries in philosophy is that great philosophical works often lead to a shift in the meaning of the central terms. So, Kant wrote, I have it here, I'll show you. Kant wrote this book, The Critique of Pure Reason. It's this thick, and near the front he uses the words a priori and a posteriori, and analytic and synthetic. By the time you've got to the back, by the time Kant has finished, those words have gradually acquired new meanings. And he's done new things with them. He's putting them to new kinds of work, right? Which is why this is such a pivotal book in the history of philosophy. Students sometimes ask for a glossary. Can you just give us a philosophical dictionary? Just tell us what these technical terms mean. The answer is no. No, we won't. Because if I were to give you a definition of synthetic and analytic, for example, well, I don't know whether you're reading an instance of those words from before Kant changed their meanings, or whether you're going to be reading an instance of those words from after he changed their meanings, or you might be trying to read Kant himself, in which case a clear dictionary definition that gives you the idea that those words have fixed, clear meanings, is really, really unhelpful, because what's going on in here is that those meanings are in motion. So there are dialectical changes in the meanings of philosophical terms, and you need to be aware of that. That the clarity that we'd all like isn't always possible, certainly not in the great historical texts. Okay. Third reason for not relying on dictionaries for philosophical purposes is that some words don't seem to have essential meanings. And here is the classic case. Here's Wittgenstein staring off to the side like a genius. And here's his example, the word game. So what necessary and sufficient conditions does something have to have in order to be a game? Well, does it have to be fun? No. Word association with your psychiatrist may not be fun. Professional sports people, I think, very often don't have fun playing games. Johnny Wilkinson apparently didn't enjoy rugby much. It was a well-paid job, but do they have to have rules? Well, no. Little children play all sorts of games that don't seem to have any rules. Cats and dogs play games. What are the rules of them? Doesn't have to be a human activity, because cats and dogs and dolphins play games. All these more intelligent mammals are all capable of play. And so on. So anything that you try and identify as the core of the concept of game, there is an easy counterexample. Doesn't matter. The word can function perfectly well. That's why they're called family resemblance concepts, right? Because you should think of a family photograph. And on that family photograph, there will be recognizable family features. There'll be a family nose, or family ears, or something like that. And it may be that there's no one thing that everybody in the family has, right? But everybody in the family has enough of the various features that you can recognize the family resemblance. And maybe words like game work like that. That's an interesting thought. It develops philosophical teeth when you take it and apply it to some of the philosophically interesting words like truth, knowledge, good, morality, beauty, right? Maybe Plato was wrong. Let's consider the possibility. Right? Maybe Plato was wrong. Maybe these philosophically important words are like game. Maybe they don't have essences that you can identify through their necessary and sufficient conditions. If that's the case, then the whole project of philosophy changes, because philosophy can no longer be about answering questions like what is truth, because there may not be an answer that you can give if by an answer you mean a set of necessary and sufficient conditions.